Teen laughed at Black Grandpa at Skatepark. Then he did a trick no one had seen before. It was a golden afternoon, the kind where sunlight painted everything with warmth, and the air buzzed with the sound of wheels grinding against concrete. The town's skatepark, a modern layout of bowls, ramps, and rails, teemed with teenagers in oversized shirts and sneakers. Most of them were white, bouncing with youthful energy, filming tricks for TikTok or simply hanging out with their cliques. Among the crowd, a figure stood out, not because of flashy clothes or a wild stunt, but because he didn't seem to belong. A tall, dark-skinned man in his 60s stepped onto the edge of the park, carrying a worn but clearly loved skateboard under one arm. His clothes were simple: faded jeans, a loose flannel shirt, and a cap pulled down low over silver-streaked dreadlocks. Kyle noticed him first. 17, cocky and loud, Kyle was the unspoken leader of the park's regulars. "Yo," Kyle laughed, nudging his friend. "Who let someone's grandpa in here?" His crew burst into laughter. "Maybe he's here to recycle cans," another joked, pointing to the trash bins nearby. The man didn't respond. He just stood silently, watching the kids twist and flip through the air like birds testing their wings. There was no anger in his eyes, only something deeper, like a distant memory playing on loop. As the laughter faded and the boys returned to their antics, one teenager hesitated. Liam, a quiet 15-year-old with straight black hair and the calm gaze of someone who saw more than he spoke, skated over to the man. "Hey," Liam said, adjusting his board underfoot. You skate?" The old man looked down at Liam and smiled, not unkindly. "I used to," he said, his voice warm and deep, like an old jazz record. "Long time ago. You got a board," Liam noted, glancing at the skateboard under his arm. It had old-school designs, scuffed wheels, and a few cracks near the tail, but it looked solid. "Yeah," the man said softly, his eyes still tracking a teenager landing a sloppy kickflip. "Back in the day, we didn't have parks like this. Just sidewalks, parking lots, and police telling us to move along." Liam tilted his head. "You mean like the 80s? The man chuckled. "70s, too. I was skating when folks didn't think black kids should be anywhere near a board, let alone good at it." Liam blinked. "Wait, for real? That was a thing?" "Oh yeah." He nodded, his gaze still distant. "Back then, skating was a different world. You had to fight to be seen. And if you were black, you had to fight twice as hard to just exist." There was a pause. The noise of the park faded into the background as Liam tried to picture it. A black skater in a time when the sport barely accepted anyone who didn't look like the kids dominating the park today. "So why'd you stop?" Liam asked. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at the sky as if searching for something in the clouds. "Life," he said simply. "Sometimes it takes you places you don't choose, but you never really forget how to ride. It stays with you, like a song you can't stop humming." Liam smiled. "What's your name?" "Raymond," the man replied. "Raymond Johnson." The boy nodded. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Johnson. I'm Liam." They shook hands. It was a small moment, unnoticed by the rest of the park. But something passed between them. Respect, curiosity, and perhaps the beginning of something neither quite understood yet. Behind them, Kyle glanced over again, smirking. "Look at that. Little Liam bonding with Skate Grandpa." The group laughed once more, louder this time. But Raymond didn't even flinch. He just kept watching. Waiting. The following evening, the sky glowed in soft orange and violet as Raymond sat alone on a bench at the edge of the skate park. The old skateboard rested across his lap like an artifact, its scratched grip tape tracing stories no one there cared to know. The laughter from the teens echoed in the background, but Raymond's mind was far from the present. He closed his eyes. The sounds around him melted into the roar of a crowd, cheering, music blasting from cheap speakers, wheels clattering on wood. It was 1978, and the humid Georgia air clung to his skin like syrup. Back then, he was known as Ray J the Blur, a skinny, fearless 19-year-old who flew through parking lots with the kind of style that made people stop and stare. The only black skater at most competitions. He remembered his first real competition. People whispered when he signed up. Judges raised eyebrows when they saw his name, and when he landed a flawless 360 slide off a rail that no one else dared. The applause was lukewarm, reluctant. "You got style, kid," one of the white judges had said afterward, smiling with tight lips. "But you'd probably do better at basketball." It wasn't a compliment. It was a dismissal. Over the years, Raymond learned how to nod and keep moving. But even as he climbed the ranks and gained underground fame, sponsors avoided him. "Not the image we're going for," they'd say. "Skating's already niche. We can't confuse the audience." But it wasn't until the Savannah State Invitational that everything fell apart. He was at the top of the ramp, preparing for a trick he'd been working on for months. It was going to blow the judges away. Then, as he dropped in, his foot barely touched the board. Someone shoved him. A blink, and he was mid-air, flailing. He crashed shoulder first into the concrete. A gasp rolled through the crowd. He blacked out with the sound of laughter ringing in his ears. The official report said he lost balance. No investigation, no names, no apology. It took 3 months before he could walk without pain, but the damage was deeper than bone. Something inside him broke that day, not just trust, but the fire. He sold his custom deck, gave away his wheels, and never returned to the circuit. Instead, he took up work at a metal factory, welding pipes and lifting steel, burying his dreams beneath the grind of machines. When his wife died of a stroke 6, years later, he raised their daughter alone, trading kickflips for grocery lists and lullabies. The years blurred. Skating became a ghost, a memory he kept folded in the back pocket of his mind, like an old photograph never shown. He opened his eyes. Now, 50 years later, that same ache pulsed in his chest. Not from the fall, but from the fact that history still echoed. Kyle and his friends weren't new. They were the same voices, just younger, louder, filmed on smartphones now. Across the park, Kyle held up his phone, grinning into the camera. "Skate Grandpa, back again," he laughed. "Can someone get this man a cane or a time machine?" His crew howled with laughter. They zoomed in on Raymond, sitting quietly, unmoving. Maybe he thinks he's going to teach us how they skated with dinosaurs. Another burst of laughter. The video was already being uploaded. Raymond didn't move, didn't speak, but the fingers on his right hand unconsciously tapped the edge of the board on his lap, tap, 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 as if rehearsing an old rhythm. He hadn't come here to skate. He just wanted to feel the air again, hear the wheels again, smell the wood and dust. But they didn't know who he was, what he'd done, what he'd survived, and they sure as hell didn't know what he was still capable of. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, when the park was at its most crowded. The air was electric with the sound of clattering wheels, kids yelling out tricks, and the low thump of music blasting from a portable speaker. Parents sat nearby under trees, sipping iced coffee, while skaters zipped back and forth across concrete ramps under the blazing sun. Raymond had taken his usual spot on the edge, quietly watching, his board resting across his knees like always. He didn't expect anything to be different about today. Just another round of teenage ego, another hour of background laughter. But then Kyle strutted over with his phone already recording, his voice louder than usual. "Still here, Grandpa?" He sneered. "Man, I swear, this guy's like a ghost that won't go away." Raymond didn't flinch. Kyle turned to his growing audience. About a dozen skaters had gathered now. "Yo, for real? Who let this guy think he belonged here? Ain't no retirement home for old black dudes in this park." Liam, who had just landed a clean heel flip, stopped mid-roll. His face twisted with disbelief. "Hey, yo, that's not okay," Liam snapped, skating up beside Kyle. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Kyle laughed, but there was an edge of surprise in his voice. "Relax, man. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Dude's like a relic. No, Liam said firmly, louder now. You're just being a racist jerk. Again, a few heads turned. A circle started to form. Phones came out. Kyle's grin faltered for the first time. Then, without a word, Raymond stood. The crowd parted instinctively as he walked forward, his movements deliberate and unshaken. He bent down, picked up his skateboard, and walked toward the starting ramp at the edge of the park. Someone in the crowd whispered, "No way. He's not actually gonna—" Raymond stepped to the top of the slope, planted his board. He took a breath, deep and slow. And then he dropped in. For a half second, everyone held their breath, expecting a stumble, a fall, a disaster. But then came the sound. The clean slice of wheels gripping concrete, the perfect angle of his knees bending into a turn, and then he launched. Christ air, his body twisted high above the coping, arms out like a cross. Holding the board with one hand as he spun through the sky, gasps rippled through the park. Finger flip, he caught the board mid-air, flipped it with 3 fingers, landed smooth. No comply. His front foot stepped down while the back foot snapped. The tail, sending the board spinning under him as he rejoined it in mid-motion, sliding across a ledge with perfect balance. Silence. Even the speaker had cut out. Every jaw in the park was slack. Every phone was raised. Then, Raymond circled back, pumping hard, gathering speed again. He aimed for the tallest quarter pipe, climbed it without hesitation, and unleashed something no one there had ever seen. The Harlem Ghost. He flew off the edge, body twisting sideways like a phantom, his board flipping beneath him in a motion that seemed almost wrong, like physics shouldn't allow it. But it snapped back into place. Just in time. He landed backwards, balanced for a heartbeat on one foot, and then rolled out, smooth and silent. No one cheered. Not yet. It took 2 full seconds for the crowd to believe it was real. Then the explosion came. Cheers, shouts, hands thrown in the air. Dozens of teens ran toward him, shouting things like, "Did you see that? What the? How did he do that? Who is this guy?" Someone screamed, "Yo, I got the whole thing on video." Liam stood frozen, grinning wide. Kyle's face was pale. His phone was still filming, forgotten in his hand. Raymond coasted back to the edge, stepped off his board and smiled. "I didn't come here to prove anything," he said, not looking at anyone in particular. "But sometimes, you gotta remind people who paved the road they're skating on." He sat back down, breathing evenly. Calm. By the time the sun began to set, the clip had already hit 100,000 views, and by morning, it would be everywhere. By Sunday morning, the internet had already crowned a new legend. The video of Raymond's performance lit up every corner of social media: TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube. Clips of the 360 Christ air, the finger flip, the mysterious Harlem Ghost, each one looped millions of times, dissected in comments, and hailed as the cleanest old-school combo in skate history. Skate pages reposted it with captions like, "Respect the OGs and never judge a skater by the wrinkles." By Monday, news outlets had caught on, but it was a viral breakdown video by a popular skate YouTuber named Max Cruz that truly turned things. In his video titled, "Who is Skate?" "Grandpa?" Max pulled up old black and white footage of Southern skate tournaments in the late 70s. There he was, young, lightning-fast Raymond Johnson, spinning tricks long before they had names. Max explained how Raymond had been the underground name in Southern skating, how he'd invented one of the first street tricks ever recorded, and how his name quietly disappeared after a suspicious fall in the Savannah Invitational. "It's clear," Max said to his 2 million subscribers. Raymond Johnson was erased, not because he lacked talent, but because he was black, in a sport that wasn't ready for him. The comment section exploded. Hashtags began trending. Raymond the Legend, Skate History, Respect Your Elders. Soon, Interview requests poured in. Raymond, who'd never once been interviewed in his prime, now sat across from smiling hosts, retelling stories he thought no one had ever cared to hear. How he used to sneak into closed skate parks, how cops would tail him while he practiced, how he tried to teach neighborhood kids with broken boards and duct-tape shoes. "Did you ever think you'd be recognized like this?" one reporter asked. Raymond smiled gently. "I didn't skate to be recognized. I skated because it made me feel free. That never changed." A week later, the city held a special event at the skate park. Banners fluttered. Speakers stood at the ready. Old skaters flew in from across the country, some carrying cracked decks from decades past, hoping to shake his hand. But nothing stunned the crowd more than when Kyle stepped up to the mic. He wore no cap, no smirk, just nervous energy and a look in his eyes that most hadn't seen before. Humility. "I was wrong," he said, voice steady. "About a lot of things. About what skating means. About who gets to belong. I judged Mr. Johnson by his age and the color of his skin, and I embarrassed myself." He turned to Raymond, standing a few feet away. "I'm sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve it." There was silence, then slow clapping, then thunderous applause. Raymond walked up beside Kyle and gently patted his shoulder. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong," he said into the mic. "And it takes even more to make it right." He turned to the crowd. "Skating taught me freedom," he said. "But freedom means nothing without respect. Respect for where we come from, for who we are, and for those different from us. Black, white, young, old, rich, poor, male, female, this place, these wheels, they don't care, and neither should we." Later that day, under the golden sunset, a ceremony was held. The park officials unveiled a new sign at the top of one of the largest ramps, clean metal letters gleaming under the fading light. Raymond's legacy. Below, it, a plaque read, "In honor of Raymond Johnson, a pioneer who rode with soul, stood with grace, and reminded us all what skating truly means." Tears welled in Raymond's eyes as he looked out at the crowd, Liam grinning from ear to ear, Kyle nodding beside him, and dozens of kids now shouting his name not as a joke, but as a tribute. Every Saturday morning before the sun had fully climbed over the rooftops, the gates of the skate park creaked open, not for a competition, not for clout or content, but for something far greater. Raymond's free skate class had become a sanctuary. Children from all over town, many from working-class neighborhoods, others who'd never touched a skateboard before, showed up with borrowed helmets, chipped boards, and wide eyes. Most were kids of color. A few spoke broken English, but none of them cared who wore what or who skated how. They came because someone told them they could. That someone was Raymond. He didn't bark orders or chase perfection. He taught them how to fall without fear, how to stand with pride, and most of all, how to carve their own space in a world that often told them there wasn't one. Liam was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. He wasn't just learning tricks, he was learning legacy. He became the bridge between generations, showing his friends Raymond's old clips, narrating his past with pride, like a historian of pavement and wheels. "I didn't know skating had roots like this," one girl said. "Now you do," Liam replied, "and it's our job to keep them alive." And then, one day, Kyle showed up. No phone, no posse. Just a board and a quiet nod. Raymond said nothing at first, just handed him a helmet and pointed to the ramp. Kyle fell. A lot. But he got up every time. Over the weeks, the other students began to accept him, not because he asked to be forgiven, but because he earned it. Trick by trick, bruise by bruise. One morning, after Kyle landed his first clean kickflip, Raymond clapped once. It was quiet, but it meant the world. "I thought skating was about being the best," Kyle said later. Breathless, sweat dripping. "But it's really about being honest with yourself, isn't it?" Raymond chuckled. It's always been about staying on your feet when life throws curves. Skating just makes it literal. Then came the announcement that would make history. New skate tournament, the Unity Jam, backed by national sponsors and local activists. But this time, there was a twist. Alongside the usual youth and pro divisions, the organizers introduced a brand new category, Vinyl Legend Division, for the forgotten pioneers, the ones the cameras missed, the ones who paved the way. Raymond didn't hesitate. He signed up. On the day of the event, the park overflowed. Families crowded the rails, news crews circled, and past legends emerged from the shadows, some limping, some gray-haired, but all burning with pride. When it was Raymond's turn, the crowd fell still. He stepped up the ramp, his board tucked beneath one arm. The same board he'd used to silence a park full of doubters weeks ago. The one Liam had polished with care, the one Kyle had helped re-grip the night before. He looked out at the crowd, at Liam, beaming like a sun, at Kyle, hands clenched in nervous respect, at dozens of kids holding homemade signs, Skate Grandpa, Goat, We Ride Because He Did, Harlem Ghost, Forever. Raymond dropped in. This time, no one laughed, no one doubted. He flew. And when he rose into the air, limbs outstretched, board spinning in that impossible motion, the Harlem Ghost, a wave of silence swept across the park. Then came the roar. It wasn't just applause. It was acknowledgement. When Raymond landed clean and upright, tears welled in his eyes. He wasn't just finishing a trick. He was finishing a chapter that had been left unwritten for too long. The announcer's voice boomed over the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, he's not just a skater. He's a legacy on wheels. And as the crowd chanted his name, Raymond turned to the younger skaters lining the fence and raised a single fist in the air, strong, steady, and full of hope. Don't ever let the world tell you where you don't belong, he called out, because now, thanks to him, they never would. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And always remember, respect has no age, no color, and no limit. Keep rolling forward.